Hello, hello, hello. You are back once again with the Virtual Agile podcast. This is Chris Stone, the continuous improvement coach. And today I am joined by one of the co-authors of the Agile Manifesto and a self-described Agile Wrangler. Hello, John. How's it going?
Hi, Chris. Good. Yeah. Wrangler. I forgot about that. If that translates, it's like trying to wrestle things to the ground and playing wild steer, even though I would never do that in my life because it's super dangerous. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Reminds me of Steve Irwin. Just like wrestling crocodiles.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like a lot of upside.
So for any of our listeners who aren't familiar with you, John, give us a little bit about you and who you are and what you're about and what you're passionate about.
Sure. Well, I'm an aerospace engineer by training. So like the first half of my career, cruise missile engine, research and development and testing and altitude chambers, learned so much there. Moved on to flight simulation, aerodynamics, models, building. Like you might be familiar with the F-14 from the famous movies, Top Gun. And we had a 50-foot centrifuge. So we could smack you with full G forces, just like in an airplane. So I put many a Navy pilot through F-14 flat spin. I won't say training, but it's kind of how to get out of a flat spin and familiarization to realize this is no joke, like it actually happened. So that was a fantastic part of my life. And so doing consulting in that company as well for Defense Department. And then that led me to founding my own company because they decided to close the bases and move elsewhere, and I didn't. And some of the consulting work that we did was building IBM's next generation manufacturing execution system, which ran all of their factories to build computers from large servers to PC companies. So that was an amazing, let's say, first project to have coming out of the chute. So I've been building software, doing consulting. Of course, the manifesto and the ensuing different companies I work for building, again, production software. I still currently code production software for Blazemark, it's for firefighters. So it's kind of my side gig since 2006, helping save lives and property and things like that. So I like to say that it keeps me somewhat honest because I still do BDD, TDD, and love. Matter of fact, it's like the best thing in the world because it's legit requirements from users that mean a lot to me. And at Adaptivist, I've been here about close to 5 years, and we've been pushing the boundaries in terms of trying to figure out better ways to help teams actually learn how to work better and be successful at coming up with ways of working that work by doing the work. So we can talk more about that later because it's a bit of a mind tease, but it's super important to understand.
Absolutely. Well, I've learned some things about you already that are awesome. I'm a huge fan of Top Gun. Something that our listeners won't know about me is that I regularly will get on my knees and serenade people to the Top Gun theme. You never close your eyes anymore. and that bar scene with Tom Cruise, with Maverick and Goose. I love that. Yep. And it's also a great question to ask in a retrospective. Where are we on the highway to the danger zone? What risks do we need to look out for, or where have we lost that loving feeling? Right? What just doesn't work for us? What are we not loving anymore?
Oh man, great tips. Yeah. If you watch it with me, especially the first one, I might pause it and geek out about all of the stuff it shows about the aircraft. Yeah. So it's awesome. Great movie.
And as you alluded to, it's about the individual and the interaction, the continuous discovery of better ways of doing things. I know you've been speaking recently about the deliberate ambiguity in the Agile Manifesto. Tell us more about that. Why is it deliberately ambiguous?
Yeah, I'm not going to say we crafted it that way. That they're like, oh wait, we should be this. I think it reflected. I like to say when we met at Snowbird, we left our egos at the door. I was certainly a youngster among giants, but I was very vocal because I had kind of created my own lightweight methodology doing Defense Department work, and then I kind of was mentored by Peter Code. He and I and some others founded TogetherSoft, which was a UML modeling tool. So it was, how should I say? Suddenly I just lost my train of thought. Hit me up again. I got sidetracked.
I was talking about the deliberate ambiguity, and you mentioned it wasn't that
Thank
it was
you.
intentional, that you checked your egos at the door.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, which is pretty amazing because there were a lot of egos in the room, but checking our egos at the door and looking back at the page where the values are, I noticed, and this wasn't too long ago that I noticed this. Is one of the things that I really push. Might sound funny, but I have a slide that I like to show. It says, be humble, even when you know you're right. Kind of, I like to joke around, but it's, humility is so important in our industry and also so lacking, sadly, but it's natural. So if you look at the top, it says we are uncovering better ways. It's active voice, right? It's not past tense. It's not like we figured it out. And that's a sign of humility. And then the whole, we value, it's not to say we don't value the things on the right. A lot of people confuse that. It's deliberately a range of certainly interactions and people over process and tools, but I'm a process nut. I built and sold tools, love tools, but it's in your context. You need to dial each of those kind of values into the right place. So that's the key. And that's also humble in that we didn't try to state something in absolute terms. And that's something that I think a lot of people gloss over. So that's where I like to just point out that those little aspects, even though they're subtle, are all about putting the onus back on the reader and the doers to dial it in for their world and what they're doing currently. And it's not a fixed item. So that's where I think the humility shows very well in the manifesto's value page.
So it's left that way to enable people to interpret it in their context and apply it accordingly.
Yeah, which a good friend of mine, Daniel Markham, points out, well, that's easy for you all to say because you're successful software developers. Okay, true. But nonetheless, what we do is not build brick after brick after brick, right? Most of the hard things we do are in the realm of the complex. It's uncertain, it's changing, it's volatile, and you cannot apply fixed process and even fixed tools probably to things that you need to innovate and create and develop. So it's very critical, in my opinion, to have to hold this in not only in mind but in your heart that you need to figure this out for where you are and constantly evaluate it. That's why for me, Agile is the hardest, even though it's the simplest concepts. It really is what I would say is the hardest thing, because you can't relax. There's always ways to get better. And there's always ways to evaluate. Did this work like we thought it would work?
And this is why I have myself pivoted in my own approach towards continuous improvement, because in my experience, and it's far less experience than yours and many of the other giants in the industry in the world. In my experience, people don't buy Agile. They're not trying to get to Agile as a destination, and customers, they don't want Agile. They want the experience, the thing that saves them time and money and energy and makes their life better. We over-focus on Agile. For me, the key is continuous improvement, right? And that's where it's right at the beginning of the manifesto. We're continuously discovering better ways. And that's why I say it's about continuous improvement, because it doesn't matter which industry, which company, which person you are, everyone wants to get better. Everyone wants to improve in the pursuit of their particular outcome in their context.
You hope. Yes. I've learned that sometimes these absolute thoughts are, maybe everyone doesn't. Like sometimes I see behavior that seems to look like not everyone wants this, but then you actually have to dig into it, get to the people side, get to the interactions and try to figure out why is this happening? And it doesn't seem like we're moving towards what I would consider value. because to improve implies you have a direction and um, something to measure yourself by. So, but yeah, I agree. It's driving towards that type of a mentality, single piece flow, continuous improvement, but don't be a freak about it. Right? That's the key. You need to collaborate, understand. Yeah, a lot of times you can sense if this feels right or not, and people have learned to suppress that. But it's so important to sense, because sometimes when you don't know, and most of the time in complex things you don't know, even though people fool themselves, oh, we just need to break it down more. Oh, we can make an estimate. They fool themselves into thinking they know. But a lot of times you can feel it. Does this feel right? And use that as a sense for take a step, not a big one, like not one over a cliff, but take a step in a direction towards continuous improvement or towards what you think value is. And then sense, are we going in the right direction? And trust me, you'll be able to act on that if you learn how to develop this. It's taken me decades. But John Turley, a colleague of mine at Adaptivist, he's really helped me see there's a lot of secret sauces that I've learned to make. They were implicit, and part of the skill is to try to make things a little more explicit so you can act on them, talk to them with other people. Things that you might do intuitively. Well, what is that? And you probably experience it as most of us do. So, yep, continuous improvement's a good strategy.
And as you've highlighted, it's often that we're working with the complex, the things that have a lot of unknowns around. And that's where that kind of Cynefin style model of, right, we need to sense first, we need to try something, we need to take action, sense, then respond, rather than having an answer predetermined or a solution in our minds, because that fixed approach probably won't work when you are dealing with this complexity. So it's the ability to respond to the situation.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, well, I think some of my good fortune and just how I've grown as a person has been fortunate, where I've been able to act sometimes. Maybe others might have thought that was kind of risky, but if you're going to make big leaps in the complex, if you can't be at least this is the way I think how I do it is I'm comfortable with not knowing. I'm comfortable with ambiguity. I'm comfortable with, I often have, the analogy of two people on your shoulder competing, and being able to hold multiple perspectives is very uncomfortable for a vast majority of like an expert type mindset who thinks everything is knowable and has an answer for everything in a process, right? That kind of, when I have to actually be very aware of who my audience is, because I can freak people out, or I can look weak, like to an expert. If I'm debating myself or having us look at things from multiple perspectives, I can see, well, come on, John, you know what to do. Just tell us what to do. So it's a real, I think, important skill to begin to develop, to allow yourself to be comfortable. It sounds weird, but to be comfortable with kind of being uncomfortable and not knowing, because that's where the magic happens. I often call it we have this fuzzy idea, and I've been using this for decades, even with like object models. It's like a model, and it might be fuzzy, and I hold it up and you look at it from different angles to see if it's still working. And I feel the same thing about big fuzzy ideas that could be kick-ass in the marketplace. If you try to turn those into make estimates and break it down and this giant, all this upfront bullshit, you're likely throwing out the part that could have been the most impactful ideas and things like that, because you're uncomfortable with it. You think you have to be able to know it all up front. So I just, one thing to try for people that I encourage is to not be so certain and not be so absolute about what's truly unknowable. Don't delude yourself. And I also often talk about try to do less than you think is necessary and see if that works, because so many people do far too much at every stage, and that's the ego, right? It's the lack of humility, where you You think this is going to be valuable, but you don't actually know it. So you just keep doing it, especially when we compartmentalize and have silos. It's easy to fall victim to this.
And it's human, right? It's the sunk cost fallacy. You invested time and energy in something and you don't want to let go of that. So you persist and you keep going on with it. And we have these biases and these assumptions that we make. And it's just human, but it's the awareness of those and then challenging ourselves. It reminds me always of MVP. A lot of people think, oh, MVP is this, MVP is that. And then they end up making this huge, complex, costly thing that takes a long time.
Yes.
Because they believe that if we don't get it all in now, it won't ever be done, because that might be their experience. Yeah, if we don't get it done now, it never gets done. So we've got to do it all. And as you say, it's focused on the simplest solution. What can we do that gives us enough information to learn? And then based on that learning, we can adjust and we can do more or less, amplify the good things, dampen the bad things. And I try to consider it more of a minimum viable experiment. What's the smallest thing we can do that gives us the most amount of information that validates that we're doing the right thing?
Yeah. I always say I can out small anybody. Like, you'd be shocked at how small of a initial version of something that I showed a customer, even though I knew, we're going to go further, and we've even mocked stuff up to go further, but it takes guts sometimes to show something that's almost humorously too small. And the challenge I always tell people is, you can always add more. Oh gosh, yeah, you want that next thing that we talked about? Of course, yeah, we'll build that. Thanks. But meanwhile, we got something out there, and see if you start using it. And I have a funny example. I won't go into details here, but yeah, it's humorously small. And the flip side is, if you build too much, you'll never get that time back. And it is part of your, like, the sunk cost fallacy, like that. You did this giant requirements document. Might as well do all the features. Like, yeah. Okay, sure. And you'll probably be late, and you probably won't, half the features won't be necessary. So it's, 80-20 rule is, put something out there, get some feedback. And, I don't know why it's so hard, but part of it is because sometimes, I'm a value nut. So I want everybody on the team to understand where we're headed, what outcomes we're looking for. We're not order takers. We're not just here to code up the feature just like the customer asked, or the product, name your role in the organization. No, that's that's a request for a discussion. And let's talk about what are you looking for? Let's think about, can we maybe do 20% of the effort and give you 80% of that? And let's test that, because that might be enough. Because we can always add, like I said, we can always add more. But I have seen, to your point, one organization, I remember they were late on this feature. So I kind of joined the team, started looking at it, what they're doing. And it was astounding. I don't remember the details. It was some kind of thing that you could do that maybe adjusted the view of maybe some reports or something. And then they had an idea that, we could actually create templates, reusable templates for things that you want to. And I'm like, OMG, you haven't even put the freaking feature out there to see anybody wants it. You held up delivering at value, and you thought of, wouldn't it be great to create templates so that they could create different things they want to do and reuse? Like, what kind of ego is that, right? To think that, number one, do they want the first thing that we built? And yet alone, maybe they want it so much that they're going to want this fancy schmancy way to control tech, right? I mean, my jaw probably hit the floor. I mean, people are trying to do their best, but the challenge is, a lot of times you have these compartmentalized. A feature comes in, and then it goes through these processes with different people that don't actually talk to each other. So many times in when we're working with companies, we bring a cross-functional team together to talk about, ways of working. And it's the first time some of them actually, you do that. And, they're kind of looking down at the virtual table. So yeah, it's crazy. Small is really good. Challenge yourselves.
I've got a personal example of this from recently. I created my OnlyFans, and I say OnlyFans with heavy jest. Like, I didn't release a platform to share nudes of mine. I called it Only Chris, to play heavily on the fact that it was a bit like creating a community where people would get extra stuff from me. And I didn't build anything at the beginning. I just spoke to 50 people and said, hey, thinking about this, is this something that you'd be interested in? And at that point, I was just getting the data. And
Yeah.
enough people said, yeah, I'd be interested. So I was like, cool. All right. So what I'll do is within a week, I had like a promo about it, and I created the baseline, the first few subscription tiers, and I shared it, and people started subscribing. So I was like, okay, that no product exists yet. I am the product. And I guess it's fortunate that I have enough of a presence online for people to trust that if I buy into this, I'm probably going to get something useful. But that was just me rapidly prototyping something before I'd even built something. Now, if I was doing it the other way around, I would have built something, spent a lot of time doing that first, and then thrown it out there and been disappointed when perhaps people weren't interested in it. Because I could invest a lot of time in the wrong thing.
Right. Exactly. And that you were able to suppress your ego, thinking you knew what people really wanted, and you tested it in the cheapest manner possible. Yeah. To me, I don't know why that's hard, except there's tons of careers involved when you see the giant pipelines in these enterprises, and everybody thinks they have the right answer, and everybody does the thing thinking it's the right, it's just, it spirals out of control pretty fast. And then you got all this shit going on and actually no value. Yeah. Anyway.
So back to the Agile Manifesto then, we see a lot of dogma with it, right? It's you are not agile if, or this is on the Agile Manifesto and you're not doing that. How do you believe it should be used? How should people be using the manifesto?
Yeah, I think one of the fun things about the Polish group I was working with, the Agile community, they did this another translation. There already was an original Polish translation, but they wanted a new one. I guess they had some issues with the existing one. And part of it was fascinating to hear questions about some of the principles. The values are one thing, but the principles, some of them are, what did you mean? Or, so there may be some reasonable things to have conversations about as a, let's say your team or your organization. But I think since Daniel Markham challenged me on the point that, what's a new person supposed to do with the four values? Like, what does that mean? Like, it meant a lot to me. You can imagine doing Defense Department work. At least 3 of those 4 bullets were pretty, like, I'm making sure that crap gets in there because, I did stupid, hey, I know, let's do a year-long contract and we'll put in a proposal and we'll put our money in there and estimate all this stuff. For research and development, it's not even like we knew exactly what we're going to do. Now we're going to actually spend a year exploring this stuff, which automatically says you don't know what you're going to do. Anyway, I created almost a defense mechanism for, I'm a taxpayer. Let's not waste our time and effort. So what's the best thing we can do? So the values themselves, I think, are a way to help you gauge maybe things you might be doing, whether you got process, a lot of times people have process police and they lose sight of the value that we're trying to actually, they don't know where we're going, but by God, we better do the retro right. Or, we better have a backlog, or we better, just get nuts about process. Or, I see tools, like a lot of people bash Jira. It's a little similar to bashing Agile and then telling me all the things that you're doing with it that aren't Agile. I witnessed a pretty humorous helping this this team that's supposed to do some Agile transformation. We went to this company and developers couldn't even drag the issue that they just got assigned into in progress. And I was like, oh, surely you must not know how to use the mouse. Let me go help you. The young whippersnapper. And like, okay, like who that, I remember going back into this Agile transformation room. Like, I've gotten a little nicer since then. But I was like, man, who the hell configured Jira? Because it sucks, right? Like, don't blame the damn tool. Blame whoever freaking configured it. And to his credit, the guy sheepishly puts up his hand. That was me. When I explained the problem, I'm like, "Bing guts." Like, you've never used Jira before, right? You didn't even just use it out of the box. You pre-configured it and you made it almost useless for the team. Like, that's, I won't say it's an innocent mistake, but it's a mistake. And it's, like, that is tools. That's not individuals. And I'm like, goodness, that's the tool suddenly taking the front seat, like, makes my head explode. So I don't know. That's how I think you might be able to use it is, how much documentation are you doing? I'm a nut about documentation and process and tools, but not over, actually getting something done. So that's how I think you can use it, is just test yourselves. Where are you on the spectrum, maybe, for each of the values?
I did see someone share a retrospective format that was deep diving into the Agile Manifesto, and it was using prompts that were probing, how can we be more individual focused over process focused? How can we ensure we are focusing more on simplicity rather than doing everything? And again, I don't think enough people consider that lens. So I believe it's a great way, the manifesto is a great way to check yourself, right? How are we matching up to this?
Yeah.
How are we ensuring it fits our context, but also how could we be more focused on these things and less focused on the wrong things?
Yeah, that's a great idea, because that's the best I could think of when Daniel challenged me on what are you supposed to do with this, And yeah, I think that's a great idea. I would hazard you might do it might take a while to do each value. Like I don't know how long that would take, but it's that's why I say Agile is frankly one of the hardest things for me to do, because you're constantly having to ask yourself and make those micro judgment calls. And that's why, whether it's a junior engineer sitting in on a meeting with the client, and of course, management is going, what can't you just hear him, John? And then you tell the devs what, sure, that might work, but no, this is how you bring more people into the fold. You help more people learn what it is. I expect everyone on the team to understand, whether it's the product idea or a feature set or a feature, what we're trying to do, because everyone's got a brain on our team. And the more people can make those micro judgments themselves, the better off we are at being agile. And that's where I think all of this, the ideas behind taking a process and ossifying it, falls into the trap of thinking we can break this. It's the factory mentality. It's the Taylorism crap. It's all that bullshit that still plagues us. And yes, I'm not saying, once I kind of get a framework going for a product app, that some apps, some of the features are pretty cookie cutter, and just, we have a pattern, everything's consistent, and don't need any UX, don't need it, it's just boom, boom, boom. But the overall approach needs to be much more, I think, thoughtful about, can I get to where we want to go, whether I'm the UX or a QA or the dev or whoever, faster and cheaper? And, can I get some value for less effort, right? That whole be lazy, I often use the be lazy mentality, which really just means, can we do things that are smaller than we think and achieve value and check our hypotheses sooner? But people can't do that if they're not given the license to do that, so to speak, or if there's not that culture and there's not the continual expression of where we're trying to go. So you have to often repeat and talk about, and really, well, it's in Jira. Okay. Right. We're not making hamburgers, right? Anyway, that's kind of how I think of it. And that retro approach would be great. Yeah.
You've reminded me of a quote, and I can't remember who it's attributed to, but it basically says that something along the lines of, companies are built on 21st century technology with 20th century hierarchy and structure, using 19th century mindset for management and leadership. And I thought, that seems very familiar.
Sadly. Yeah. I mean, it's it's the illusion of knowing, because we're taught a lot of absolutes throughout our life, starting in elementary school, 1 + 1 equals 2. It's true most of the time, but yeah, we often talk about it being a unit-wise approach is what we fall prey to. That's kind of what that alludes to, is if you let that kind of that mindset infiltrate. For one reason, it's easier, right? Because you can delude yourself and think of things are much easier to control. They're much easier to measure. if you turn things into these stepwise, turn it into the complicated instead of just the complex. There are advantages for some parts of the business, but not necessarily the customer, not necessarily the bottom line. And yeah, it's this weird, it's the weird world that we've started stepping into is, because I think this came from, I was trying to help some people understand Agile, like, well, kind of where's my brain at? And I said, look, it's not like before, Scrum was invented or Agile was invented, people weren't successful. It's like, oh, thank goodness for the Agile Manifesto, or thank goodness for Scrum. And now we can finally get some things done. No, people were having success before. And I often say it's highly capable people will create a process. As if you and I are working together with a handful of other people and we're doing something, we know we're, kind of a destination, and we start to see some patterns for them, and we might, agree to some, oh, this kind of a process works pretty well. Let's write it down. And, oh, maybe we can automate this. Oh, let's build a tool to do that, because it sucks doing it by hand. And right. Good, capable people will create process and they will create tools. But that's one of the reasons that we work with people. Like, you can't learn Agile from a book. Can't even learn Agile from training. Although I have some immersive type, 1 day, fun. We just did it in Lisbon in September, a way to try to immerse and experience Agile. I say you have to experience it. You have to be in the flow of real work to kind of get it. So we only work like like, to me, training's pointless about this sort of thing. So we try to work with teams doing the real work, because when you didn't have a process that you could implement and you had to do it yourselves, like the little example about you and me working on something, it's doing the work will, we'll create a way of working while we're doing the work, and we'll adjust it based on the ways that are working. Right. I mean, the word work is too many times almost humorously, but not really. Like that gets lost when suddenly the process is, quote unquote, one size fits all, slam it into place. Right. No, it's the reason it's hard is we need to continually be able to evaluate, is our way of working actually working to do the work, and reject the things that aren't working and continue the things that are working. And that's where I think we go off the rails, is that's too hard for a lot of management, to think of that constant reevaluation of what we're doing, and the ability to color outside of the lines, not just be, a process freak, have process police for a fixed process that might not actually apply so well to the current context we're in.
And that just reminds me how else the manifesto could be used. You could literally put it in front of the whole company on like a large town hall style session, and imagine like a virtual whiteboard, and you can say, hey, of these principles, which ones are we most impacted by, or which ones are we living the least? Right? And you get people to vote, and then that narrows down to where we need to focus, and then you could begin exploring, right, so how could we ensure we are exhibiting that value more in the future? And then you're basically identifying systemically the things that are holding that company back from being agile. And then you design experiments with those people to see what you could do next. What's the smallest thing we could do to try and address that problem?
Yeah. Now here's a fun, subtle tip and trick. So it's talking a little bit about how could we do something differently in the future, which is often what we're, server crashes, well, we want to have, some future unicorn world. Well, we can talk about that. And it's almost like we can talk about the work, but that's not the work. So a funny twist to what you're talking about is still like using, like you said, identify some area that we think is the most impactful. Cool. Instead of asking a very logical question like, well, how can we, be more interaction first? Instead, ask, why are we doing what we're doing now? Because the first question about, how could we work this magical way in the future is hypothetical, but rather what's causing us to act this way instead? because that's the actual challenge is, oh yeah, what the hell? Why, why does somebody do something that, if I walk in and look at it, I wouldn't say this probably. Well, that's a pretty stupid thing to do. Like, why'd you think that's going to work? Right. Or why did you do it for all 8 teams? Why didn't you just try one first and see, and then maybe, you know, so asking how, why something happens the way it happens. And the challenge here is most people will start to give glib answers like and so you need to be a little, the old 5 whys, or just keep picking a little bit, pick and get at, why are we not working why are we working this way, which is sort of against one of the principles or one of the values. And then you might actually find a cause, something. Now, to your point, now you have something to take action on. Oh yeah, we don't really have a lot of conversations around here, or they're very shallow or something. Yeah.
To build on that, I think it's also great to, let's say you've got 8 teams, right? And you're asking about this topic, let's call it simplicity, to find out which team is shielded from that as a problem. So which one is not facing this impediment, was not held back by this, and saying, okay, why? Why are they protected from this? Why are they in a little bubble that enables them to do this? And that can, again, unlock, a way forwards. And then a further one on that is, rather than saying, hey, why are we doing it this way? Or how could we be better? Say, how can we make it worse? Let's kill it. Let's make our customers hate us. And then, that can be quite fun, right? It's like, oh, we could do this, we could do that. And then you're basically using reverse brainstorming to look at the negative, and then you can work backwards and say, okay, we did this, they'd hate us. But if we did this, they'd love it. Okay, we'll do that. And that can be a good way of moving forwards too.
Yeah, that sounds funny. A lot of times, like those crazy ass bugs where I'd be like, if we had to make this as a feature, I don't even know how we do that. Right. Like those kind of, so it is a little bit, the reverse psychology can sometimes be humorously applied, yet actually it helps spring forward radically different thinking, because it is so, preposterous to ask a question like, what would be a great way to piss off the customers? Oh yeah. I have a completely different UX everywhere, because it looks like 3 different teams designed this, 3 different teams designed these damn part of the apps. Come on. Yeah.
How could we make the customer hate the product? How could we make more people cancel our service? How could we communicate it the worst way as a team? How could we feel less connection to our colleagues? How could we have no sense of purpose and direction in what our work is? There's so many ways of using this.
How could we overbuild?
How could we overbuild? How could we make more defects happen? How could we focus less on quality? There's so many ways you can do it. And it's just a fun way of identifying a path forwards. Also it uses our natural bias towards negativity. We spot problems more easily than we do solutions or answers.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. How can we use tools more?
Exactly. How could we be more tools focused? Yeah.
Right.
How could we make Jira the center of our universe?
Right. Yeah. How can Jira run our company? Yeah.
That is, I'm afraid, all we have time for. In the interest of simplicity, we need to wrap things up, John. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and insights. Where can our listeners learn more about you and your work?
Oh, I suppose LinkedIn. I do have a long running site called technicaldebt.com, but I'm not going to say I update that very much. I should be less lazy and do stuff there. But you can find me on LinkedIn, and you'd be shocked. I help people all around the world. All it takes is just ask, and I say even some, quite often for free. Matter of fact, mostly for free. Like we do consulting and adaptiveness, but I love learning about other people's situations and their teams, and just chatting with them, maybe an hour a week or something like that, or every month. So hit me up, find me just like you did. You found me. Of course, we've met in person too, but.
And I'm sure we'll see you at another conference. So you heard it here, folks. Hit up John if you want to chat about Agile. Again, that's all we have time for. So until next time on the Virtually Agile podcast. Of course, if you want to hear from other people like me and John, then you know what to do. You got to press that follow or subscribe button to catch every episode as they land. Until next time, don't stop believing. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.